Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dhiren Boesa, and in today's module, we are going to talk about traditional and modern methods of resource consumption in different geographical regions. And what we are going to do is we are going to give a brief introduction to this subject matter. What we aim to do in this particular module is to A, broadly contextualize the issues around resource consumption and relationship with carrying capacity, and the need for ecological prudence. What we'll also try to do is to have an overview of the global resource consumption and understand what is this tradition and what is this modern in the resource management practices, and how can human society devise ecological prudent practices. So if we look at current situation, we currently struggle within the fit of dwindling resource base and rising population sizes. Now, this relationship is of peculiar nature and geographically representative of a mismatch between the scarce resources and the carrying capacity. Also, the burgeoning levels of economic and social inequalities the society is facing. The question that we raise here in this module is that of consumption of resources that on one hand stands on the cultural idea of what qualifies as a resource, be it land, water, forest, energy, or say even human beings, produce specific geographies. And these geographies is based on certain flows, certain spatial relationships, and such can be seen across diverse societies from hunting and gathering to industrial and consumerist cultures. On the other hand, we also raise questions on over and underutilization of resources that give a cry for that sustainable usage of ecology and ecological prudence should be practiced to keep current and future generations in mind. Now, this narrative is also about the ownership of the resources. Who owns the resources? The common property of resources, the common pool of resources. The question of access to them, the social relations within which the extraction and the utilization operates, the geographical backdrop of the terrain, and the resources available with their limitedness, and the various modes of consumption and management practices that we employ for this utilization and extraction. In the current section, we briefly navigate through these questions that we just raised to comment upon the changing resource consumption practices, both traditional and modern, and how both can be synthesized to look at their sustainable usage of resources. Let's start with the first question: ecological prudence. And why do we need this ecological prudence? And when we are going to talk about this question of ecological prudence, we are going to talk about in this context of carrying capacity of earth resources and this notion of overconsumption of earth resources. Now, Gavin Brown, he wrote a paper in 2009 called Material Worlds, Natural Resources, Resource Geography and Material Economy, and he was arguing that our economies, if not exclusively, but fundamentally depend on material transformations of our natural resources, both biotic and abiotic, into a vast array of commodities. And therefore, by its extension, that we produce a vast array of waste products. From the food we eat to drinking water or various kinds of substances, a soap or a spoon, etc., are all part of this consumption chain. What Bridge is saying is that this extraction, production and consumption is producing a lot of paradoxes and contradiction. That many resources that we extract and consume have a finite life. They are unevenly distributed and mostly non-renewable and suffering immense pressures of population. The concept of carrying capacity suggests the maximum population that the Earth's resources can survive indefinitely given the available pool of food, habitat, water and other needs. With population size crossing over 7 billion mark, with a probability that we are going to reach 10 billion mark by 2050, and which is going, and with corresponding unevenly distributed global resource base, and also political economy of resource extraction, exchange and consumption, that we are going to face a crisis of overconsumption. Now, what is this overconsumption? Overconsumption refers to a situation of depleting resource bases and environmental degradation emerging out of prolonged extraction of finite resources beyond their capacity of sustainable replenishment. And all we remember Mahatma Gandhi's famous quote where he says that the earth that we live in has enough for human needs but does not have enough for human greed. According to a report on resource overconsumption by CERI, which is a group of ecologists and environmentalists in Austria, and the Global 2000, which is this Friends of the Earth Austria group, which was published in 2009, that the human use of the Earth's resources has grown over 50% over a period of 3 decades. That in 30 years we have increased the consumption of the Earth's resources 50%. That which is likely to reach 100 billion tons per year of raw material extraction by year 2030 from 60 billion tons in 2009. So what we are witnessing? So we are witnessing across the globe changing climatic patterns, depleting freshwater resources, shortage of food supplies, the challenges to fertility of land, fuel shortages and uneven supplies, endangerment of extinction of several species of flora and fauna that inhabit the earth alongside us. The coping abilities to such changing terrain of resource consumption is also variedly marked, impacted through the geographies of socio-economic inequalities and levels of development. Areas which are rich in resource base but lacking technological know-how of extraction, as noted modern, hinting towards scale of extraction and production, have historically fallen prey to areas that grow rich at the cost of them. So that is that richer, high consuming countries import a great amount of resources from poor, low consuming countries. Now, despite growing resource efficiency through technological advancement, our economies have outgrown the efficiency increments, burdening resource bases and expanding global injustices. The sufferers of the aftermath of the resource overconsumption and the impacts of its prolonged continuation are also more likely to be these areas marked by poverty and inhabited by poor people, the developing countries. Economically rich industrial countries such as of North America and West Europe consume up to 4 to 8 times more per capita resources as compared to the poorer agricultural dependent countries of Africa, Latin America and Asia, and 30 times over the hunting and gathering societies. This state of overconsumption directs us towards the question of ecological practices, linking the issue to how are these resources managed. Rather than aiming or asking us to return to Stone Age, that let's reduce our resource consumption, the attempts that the society is making or the economy is making are towards efficient use of available resources by better modes of management. And how do we do it? By reducing our ecological footprints. Now, what is this ecological footprint? Now, ecological footprint refers to the impact of human activities on available productive land and water resources required to supplement human survival and generated waste products. Now, let's look at the figure in the PPT. It reflects the global consumption trend, And if one were to see it, this global consumption trend of resources has seen a tremendous growth across the period. This increase is variedly represented across geographical regions of the world. And there are startling gaps between developed countries and developing countries. This is also representative of gross lifestyle differences among these countries in terms of cultures of mass consumption, with Europe, North America and Oceania showing higher rates of resource extraction, import and consumption compared to African, Asian and Latin American countries. For instance, African countries use on an average say 10 kgs of resources per person per day, while they are extracting around 15 kgs per person per day. The excess of what they are extracting is being exported to feed the needs of these economically rich countries. Similarly, Asian countries have their extraction and consumption rates equal at 14 kgs. So like 14 kgs they are extracting out of the earth and 14 kgs they are consuming. And this per person per day. However, North America is consuming 19 kgs per person and Europe is consuming 43 kgs of resources per person. And with more involvement of state and large corporate houses in the matters of management of resources and usage as compared to the indigenous modes of community-based relationship with nature and resources, ecologists suggest a grim future ahead. So if there is this growing trend of consumption of resources, the question that we are raising is on how should we manage this overconsumption so that we do not have a grim future that many ecologists have argued for. So there are two kinds of methodologies that one adopts in these relationships. What we are going to talk about in this section is what are the traditional and quote-unquote modern methods of resource consumption. In the light of the aforementioned geographical unevenness of the consumption of resources and resource scarcity and the way future needs are growing, the argument is let's manage these resources. And the question is about what are these traditional and modern modes of resource consumption. The question is what we started for in the first section, the question of ecological prudence. The relationship between the human environment and the non-human environment, and what ideological grounds or worldviews are we creating this distinction between, say, this is human environment and this is non-human environment. It is also about restraint prescriptions on resource extraction and usage and whether the traditional and modern wisdom can be synthesized. So Madhav Gadgil in his paper Traditional Resource Management argues that the distinction between modern and traditional lies between the way relationship between resources and human usage is mediated. That while within indigenous communities which have a smaller scale of practice and live in closely knit networks, the conceptualization of nature is often synonymous with the human. So there is no stark distinction between, say, this is human and this is nature. That, on the other hand, the modern scientific methods built on consumptive and extractive relationship with the environment that produces a distance between the human and the non-human. The traditional ecological knowledge symbolizes or builds itself on the interconnectedness of the earth as a system. While as a term it became popular in 1980s, we know that human culture since time immemorial, even from the days of the hunting and gathering societies, have devised and applied these knowledge mechanisms. They represent cultural continuity. And this cultural continuity is in terms of social attitudes and belief systems, and often these belief systems cannot be separated from the way we look at religion, the way we look at spirituality. So they are based on human conventions and behaviors that have developed through historically experiencing and testing of acquired knowledge. And this acquired knowledge has certain embeddedness in places, that it has originated at different locations. Often one assumes that because these traditional methods are historically acquired, they are something that are fixed, they are static. They are something that they are, and we often call, they are old things, old ideas. Often one assumes that because traditional methods are historically acquired, there are some things that are fixed and static. They are the old things, sad, done things. But this is not true. Traditional knowledge is just time-tested wisdom. It evolves through experience. It involves practical common sense maintained through cross-generational learnings. And it is rooted in spiritual health of the community. It sets rules of resource use and management through sharing and respect. In short, it is a way of life, way of knowing things, and way of doing things. Berkes, in his book Sacred Ecology, wrote a book called Sacred Ecology, defines it as a cumulative body of knowledge, practice, and belief, evolving by adaptive processes and handed down through generations by cultural transmissions about the relationships of living beings, including all of us, with one another and with their environment. The definition implies that this set of knowledge is embedded within local cultures and linked with the place. That it gives importance to the community. It also lacks any separation, any kind of separation between nature and culture, or the idea of the subject and the idea of the object. What it means is that environment is treated with paramount importance as something that is unique, something that you can't just think and replace it. It can't be replaced with anything else. Contrary to this, the Western scientific knowledge puts subject and object and nature and culture in, say, separate boxes, two separate boxes. So it is disembedded and works on the principle of universalizing and generalizing, where nature is looked at as a commodity that is available to us to be consumed. The distinction between these two modes of consumption is in terms of networks that we create, the social and economic institutions that built these knowledge systems, and the way these knowledge systems are practiced. They're built through the idea of folk ecology, producing interactive relationship between human and non-human beings, often questioning this forced distinction. These relationships are not homogeneous relationships, they are not monolithic relationships. They are heterogeneous in character. And they're contextual of the immediate environmental conditions within which they are emerging. So the perceived and experienced relationship with resource use and their fluctuations, for instance, due to perceived fluctuation in resource bases, say for instance, certain hunting and gathering societies or communities impose restraints on the use. On the contrary, in modern consumption practices, several communities might think that their resource base is never ending, it is not going to exhaust itself. So they will continue to extract more and more out of it. Like for instance, what happened in colonial times, that because they knew they could find more places, more areas where resources can be exploited from, they continued going on that economic growth model. So there are two different distinct models. Similarly, societies can perceive resources as finite and sensitive to further utilization to the effect that it will no more be available, and thus it may provoke restraints that will stop its consumption and extraction and call for sustainable usage. Now, these traditional practices often involve community-based management with local institutions for governing common pool of resources. The effectiveness of such mechanism is thus more due to these institutional frameworks rather than this idea that in those societies resources are super abundant. Resources are not super abundant anywhere. As against this, modern represent a monolithic vision that produces homogeneous perspectives that's on resource management governed through institutions of the state. The distinction between traditional and modern is also of scale, of empirics, and testability of management practices, where every part of natural environment, and that's what traditional ecological knowledge do, is given equal importance. Now, this can take form in terms of animistic societies. This takes shape in form of cultural and religious significations in which trees, animals, mountains and water bodies, etc. take form of a significant part. This relationship is where we call certain, and this relationship what Gadgil talks about is between this differences in worldviews of people. That traditional ecological knowledge builds on the idea of community of beings, that everybody is interlinked, interrelated, and the modern Western thinking builds on this power of the dominion, that man has a dominating relationship with the nature, that we can change. Now let's take one example. One very common example would be the Niyamgiri Hills in Odisha. Now if we look at Niyamgiri Hills in Odisha, it is mostly inhabited by Dongriya Kond tribes. Now for Dongriyas and Konds, this mountain is extremely sacred. They worship it. They worship it as like a devta. And this sacredness is also linked with that it is also the provider of resources. It provides them water, forest, food product, employment, livelihood, whatever. As against this, the bauxite reserves found in this Niyamgiri Hills have attracted both Odisha State Mining Corporation and the Vedanta Corporation that have triggered in resource conflict situation. So therefore, the distinction between the traditional and modern is also then the economic relationship of production and consumption logic behind such productions of profit maximization and efficient usage. Let's look at some of the other examples of it. That how one can say put resource restraints. Geographical regions, and most of these crises in geographical regions can be tackled through what Gadgil says, through following certain thumb rules. And these thumb rules of sustainable usage, and they involve a synthesis of both traditional and modern methods. It can include in form of maintenance of resources above the threshold level of providing total protection to certain habitat patches, or say protection of certain species to minimize community level disruption, that the species should not get exhausted. That a lot of these harvesting practices, if one figures out that the species is diminishing, can be abandoned. That when we spoke about the distinction between traditional and modern methods, we also spoke about this distinction is not that stark. It's not that traditional is opposite to modern. That the distinction is the distinction of a degree. And there are so many parallels that can be drawn between traditional methods and modern methods. Like for instance, let's look at that certain communities, what they do is they try to say that you cannot cut more wood from this forest after this limit, and they feel that it's over extracting. Similarly, modern methods say let's put some quantitative restrictions on timber extraction on certain areas during certain seasons. Similarly, there might be communities which might say stop harvesting certain species if their number starts declining. And one can see a similar thing in, say, the Red Data book, where all endangered and extinct species are noted. protection of certain species under religious rubric, like the black bucks of Rajasthan that the Bishnoi community takes care of, can be paralleled with the Wildlife Protection Acts. Also, certain areas are considered sacred groves in what applies in principle to state institutions or national parks where state delimits human interference. Let's briefly summarize what we just talked about traditional modes of resource consumption and the modern modes of resource consumption. Traditional modes of resource consumption involve folk classification of landforms. They call it sacred patches, common resource areas, and also involve management of the same through local institutions, community institutions. Shifting cultivation and jhuming, restraints and time consumption through following of land and protection of species, interlinkage of, say, livelihood, economy and culture of the locality, etc. Most of this knowledge is generational and proven through practice by localized communities and works within closely knitted networks of people. However, many of them have suffered breaking down through advent of cash economies and corporate and state management of resources, which works at widening the gaps between man and nature through a monolithic vision of consumption of resources and their management. With growing social complexities and economic demands with ever-increasing population, these traditional modes are insufficient in themselves to help resolve the crisis of overconsumption and thus lead to prudent ecological practices. Probably what is required is an integrated approach between these traditional and modern modes of resource conservation so that we can ensure a sustainable use amongst growing population demand and the idea of resource scarcity of the exhaustible resources. Traditional wisdom here is likely to complement modern technology and thought to expand its outreach and help in better governance of resources, keeping contextual factors in mind and work towards effective sustainable practices. Thank you so much.